Go ahead and call the meeting to order at 9 o'clock. Chris, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we do the roll call this morning, if anybody didn't read the sign downstairs, when you come into the meeting, at least wave at the security guard and let them know that you're here for the Election Integrity Commission. They won't make you sign the log, or they didn't make me sign the log, but just let them know that you know why you're here, and they know why you're here. You're not a perceived security threat. So if you just walk past them, they may tackle you and keep you from getting up there. So. And when we do roll call this morning, if everybody could participate, just we have a couple of new members here, so everybody knows who everybody is. Even though you're not officially a part of the committee, you do honor us with your presence on occasion. So, Greg.
Brad Nelson.
Steve Pothier.
Dave Wiseley.
Michael Dale.
John Cote.
Levoy, Hurley.
Chris Cole.
Bill Beard. Jeff Rogers.
Herbert, Tellman.
Arnie.
Urken.
Thank you.
There's Arnie.
Brian Bickel. Call to the public. I don't believe we have any members of the public here who want to say anything. Meeting summary approval. It was an extremely busy month for me. I had numerous vacations that I took. Obligations I had to fill. I didn't do a meeting summary, but Michael attached a summary to the video. I haven't taken a look at it. I don't know.
It's just timeline.
Okay, it's a timeline. Since I'm finding myself time constrained and nobody else really wants to do a meeting summary, what I would appreciate it if you would do is, the only thing that's a concern to anybody is motions that are made, who makes them, who seconds them, annotate the timeline if that happens, and we'll make sure that you get that information and publish that as a meeting summary.
If I can hear them say it and they say their names and I can generally get it down.
I will make sure that you know, and they will speak loudly enough.
That would be easy enough to do on the timeline.
Okay. Chairman's report. I don't have anything relevant other than Mr. Cote is the new representative from the Republican Party replacing Benny.
Benny Hill.
Benny White.
So fortunate.
That's my neighbor. Welcome.
If Benny Hill was here, we'd have a lot more fun.
Our alternative to Benny Hill is Chris Cole.
Yes, I love my bad jokes.
I'll do Monty Python.
Steve Pothier, who's replacing Tom Ryan. You have big shoes to fill, as you do. They were both very engaged in the process, so and very well informed.
Welcome.
And unfortunately, very frustrated on a number of occasions.
Welcome.
Well, I'm sure I can fill that part.
Next item on the agenda, legislation update. Bill.
Short and sweet. Basically, from the last update I provided you, I just indicated the ones that were actually signed by the governor. In the case of the one was forwarded to the Secretary of State as a resolution, and not really anything else to.
What actually got passed and signed by the governor is relevant to anything?
Since our last update, I didn't indicate which ones had previously been signed and which ones didn't. I'm trying to do from memory here. I know the one that was sent to the Secretary of State, HCR 2007, was something that happened after our March meeting, and the legislature adjourned. I believe SB 1437. I think that was one of the final ones that got signed, and I'm drawing a blank on what the other one was off the top of my head. I honestly don't remember.
those of you who may not be aware of it, Secretary Reagan has a procedures manual before the governor's office as well as the attorney general's office. Some weeks ago, she wrote a letter to those particular offices and said that the procedures manual is good to go, save for there was a case pertaining to LULAC against the Arizona Secretary of State and Abrams as the recorder in Maricopa County that pertained to the Fed-only voters. There has been a decree ordered by the judge that was how shall I say, a compromise, I presume, between the plaintiffs and the defendants, and I'm still absorbing what it is, but where I'm going with this is that Secretary Reagan suggested to the governor that instead of clearing, if you will, or approving the procedures manual and then having to also review and perhaps approve that issue pertaining to federal ballots, that he wait until everything get done. And now that the court has ordered a decree about the Fed-only ballot, I think we will hopefully receive a approved procedures manual soon. I will try and give you the nutshell understanding of the decree as I understand it. For those of you who aren't aware, there is a 29-day cutoff prior to Election Day in which one needs to be registered and have their registration up to date. If you register to vote with an Arizona state voter registration form or a federal voter registration form and do not provide the required U.S. citizenship documentation, you will still be on the books. However, beside your name will be an annotation saying federal only because you haven't received, the government hasn't received your proof of citizenship. What has changed in this decree is that post 29-day cutoff, and by 5 p.m. the Thursday before Election Day, you have the availability to remedy your Fed-only status and vote a full state ballot. How that's going to be dictated, if you will, procedurally within the procedures manual, I don't know just as yet. The vast majority of counties, save for Pima County and Pinal County, are on electronic poll books. I spoke to some of my colleagues yesterday, and if a person brings in their citizenship status documentation, they'll be able to update those electronic poll books in a snap, and so when that person shows up at the polls, there's not going to be any issue as to whether they're able to vote a full state ballot or a Fed ballot. Pinal County and Pima County do not have the availability of electronic poll books. So once we figure out what we're going to do and how that applies to the procedures manual, and when I say we, I mean the county recorder's office, my office, and the county attorney's office, will let you know what that situation is going to be. Right now, again, just in the discussion stages, just as we send out an early ballot addendum to the polling places that let them know after the registers and rosters were printed, here are additional people who have voted early. We think we may be sending an addendum saying here are the individuals who are no longer Fed-only status and now they're going to be full ballot status.
An addendum to the addendum?
Now then, another way that I'm going to suggest, but I don't know whether it's going to pass any type of legal test, is that if a person comes in, by the way, for those of you who don't know, our registers and rosters are hard copies that are produced about 10 to 12 days prior to election day. So if an individual is Fed only in that register or roster and comes into the polling place, my proposal, yet to be approved, is that those individuals are sent immediately to the special situations table. There they are voting a provisional ballot, but a full state ballot. Once that envelope containing that ballot gets to the recorder's office, then they will be able to verify that yes, this person is able to vote a full state ballot, or no, this person is Fed only, and then we'll duplicate the Fed offices only off of that provisional ballot onto a Fed ballot. But I don't know whether that will pass the state test or whatever else the procedures.
I know you've said this before, and I don't remember, but approximately how many people in Pima County are Fed only?
The last time we spoke with the recorder's office, I want to say it was probably 200 to 400. It fluctuates in there, and as some of you may not know, it has been the long practice of our county recorder that if an individual individual sends in a federal form or a state form without the necessary documentation, that she actually does outreach and let these people know that you're registered to vote, but you're registered to vote for federal offices only until you remedy this situation. So she does take action. I think where this kind of came from, and all I know is what I read in the papers, is when Mr. Fontes came into office in Maricopa County, there were a substantial number of forms in kind of a holding file that nobody was doing anything about, that was waiting for citizenship status.
This was one of Benny Blank's issues, and one of the things that he had was a problem with duplicating ballots that only have part of the ballot, that there's nothing in the state law that allows you to do it that way. And I think his preferred method would have been, speaking for him, his preferred method would have been to have the person fill out 2 ballots and the recorder only pick the one that counts.
But somebody will complain about that.
Why not 3 or 4?
That's provisional ballots.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you guys ever followed Benny, but I would just say that Benny wasn't real happy with what Michelle Reagan did,
Yeah.
to say the least.
We know that.
Yeah, I figured.
And then the recent federal court decision in Kansas, I don't know how that's going to affect, because Kansas had that bifurcated registration process just as we did. Certainly, I think Kansas is the 11th federal court. How that's going to apply to here in the Ninth Circuit, I've got no idea.
Also, the district court there did not do their, this applies to everybody rule, you know, it applies only to the 11th. They could have said, no, this is going to apply to the entire country.
Let's get back to practical matters here, just for the education of the, especially the new members. From a practical standpoint, Pima County, is it your sense that the Pima County attorneys are going to basically go along with your suggestion, or you have no idea?
I have no idea. We began to hear about the decree that was agreed to by the 2 parties involved, but it had not yet been accepted and ordered by the court at this
And that was about a week ago, I think,
Yeah.
in research.
Yeah, so, and for those of you who don't know it, Mr. Dan Jerkowitz is the designated elections attorney, very knowledgeable in my opinion. He is back in his office today for the first time after being off a few days. I'm imagining either sometime today, if his schedule allows, or early next week, we'll sit down and talk about it. But he may also wait until he sees what the procedure is from the Secretary of State as well.
For those of us who are new to this completely, what is your time frame mentally, if not actually, to resolve this?
It was just, if you're not familiar with it, anytime an election matter comes up, petition challenges, questions about who's eligible or not eligible to vote, the court practically clears its calendar and hears election questions right away. So I don't think this is going to be still up in the air in probably less than 2 weeks.
So the next meeting time frame, we should have a resolution of this, which will be before the primary.
I think we will have an indication of what the county attorney wants to do. Now, whether we have an approved procedures manual from the governor's and AG's office, I couldn't tell you that.
And how does this affect physically the people out at the polling then? What is your proposed solution to that for this registration?
And that would be what I'm proposing, yet not approved by any stretch of the imagination, and that is if a person comes into the polling place and beside their name is Fed only, I would propose that we go ahead and let those people vote a provisional ballot, vote a full slate of state candidates, and then have that ballot placed inside a provisional envelope, sent back to the recorder, and they make the determination whether that person is eligible to vote a full state ballot or federal only. Perhaps in addition to that, we may still send out the federal addendum that we were talking about, where we would say to each individual precinct, the following individuals are listed on your registers and rosters as federal-only ballots. However, they have since remedied that situation and are entitled to a full state ballot.
So that we're reasonably transparent in this, how do we let the public, specifically those who would be affected, know?
Well, doesn't the recorder send out a note to any Fed only?
The problem will be if there's not something from a court in a reasonable time, because we're effectively running out of time. We've got to have that pretty much figured out by August 1st.
Yes.
So that the proper notification can go out to the proper people. So basically, in 6 weeks, it needs to be resolved, period.
And who are the proper people?
Proper people pertaining to,
The way this is gonna work,
well, it's,
or not work?
I would suggest that the procedures manual is going to be law, and what it says in the procedures manual is what counties, whether it's Pima or any of the other counties, are obliged to follow.
And that's why that link on the webpage just says, nothing here.
This is on the Secretary of State's webpage?
It's on the, well, the Pima County Elections Committee, I followed some of the web links yesterday to see what they said and try to read through the material. And we get to the state, it references a state level, and that's,
The link might be broken though, but if it's the county website, the link may be broken because they may have changed where it's located on the Secretary of State's website, so.
That's correct. We'll look into
and so how do, if we change who's responsible then for changing the links when the links get
I
changed?
will, as soon as the procedures manual has been approved,
But
and it's on there.
if you are in the public and you go to that site now, aren't you somewhat confused? Shouldn't we have something, say something
it. Like what?
like what you just said? It's under review, the manual's being changed, blah, 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 whatever you want to say in your paragraph.
Cannot make a change to the Secretary of State's website.
No, but you could,
I could just take the link out of ours. That would be the easiest.
well,
way to
you
do
could put a link to a statement as to why there is no link to the Secretary of State.
You don't put a link, you just put a statement that says there's
Yeah.
no link to the secretary.
Here's what
because
we're
there's
Put a statement on our,
So we're
on
not
your
stupid,
page.
I mean, this is, I would assume there'll be other people that look at this and say,
Pretty much this room is the only people who look at that.
Never said, now wait a minute.
Pretty much.
well, I would think the board, for all of its wisdom, would not want to have that, leave that hanging, so I would urge us to put some interim statement in there as to why it doesn't connect up right.
We'll look at what it says now and make what seems to be appropriate changes, given that it's a moving target right now.
Wasn't there also something in the decree about streamlining the process of proving citizenship to going through the Department of Transportation?
There is, I didn't read that real close because I'm more concerned about what's going to happen to my voters, but there does seem to be a way in this decree that if a county receives a voter registration document that does not have the proof of citizenship, rather than putting the onus on the prospective voter, it then has a procedure where they go through motor vehicle in some capacity, but I don't know how that works.
And I was confused by this because it's not clear to me that everybody who exists is on the motor vehicle website.
True.
But if they are citizens and they have a driver's license,
No.
that's good idea.
Not necessarily. There's two driver's licenses in Arizona,
Yeah, the right driver's license.
right? And one of them has a proof of citizenship, one does not.
Any other questions on legislative update?
Thank you, Bill, for following it.
Might warm up for next year now.
Oh.
Next item on the agenda is the security plan, and before we get into this discussion, we do have a time certain for calling by ES&S, which is 9:30. So if we get in the middle, David, we're gonna cut you off, not because we
Okay.
don't like to hear from you, but we would like to accommodate ES&S, so. Knowing that,
Before I turn it over to David, unless he wants to turn it over to me, which maybe we'll do a group effort here, but the invitation for ES&S to come and speak to us, as some of you may recall, was when the proposed security plan was first brought before this body, and at some point in time, Tom Ryan, and I believe Arnie as well, wanted to know, okay, we kind of have an idea of what happens here in Pima County as far as security is concerned. What happens at the vendor? What do they do? And what do they And what do perhaps the federal testing labs and things of that nature do to ensure established test security? And so when I offered the invitation for ES&S to participate in this, I let them know that that was the focus. So I don't know whether they are prepared to talk about many other things. My understanding is we are going to be talking to the senior vice president who's in charge of certification processes for ES&S. It's a gentleman by the name of Steve Pearson. He is very knowledgeable, and they have just brought in to ES&S, and I'll let them speak for themselves, of course, a security expert that was with, I want to say HHS in the past as a federal employee, but he is now, I believe, an employee with ES&S. So when they do their presentation, they'll be speaking here. However, the presentation will be a PowerPoint and displayed on the screen here. So when that time comes, we'll be pulling down the screen, and you might want to change your location where you're seating, where you're going to be able to see a little bit better. And sorry, Arnie, we'll try and get a PowerPoint presentation to you, but I think you're just going to have to wing it for right now, but you're certainly invited to participate. Yeah.
There is a PDF copy of this PowerPoint on our website for
Okay.
item 7.
Did you hear that, Arnie?
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll look for it, thank you.
Okay, thank you. David, you have the floor.
Oh, okay. We haven't finished the security plan to let you guys review it again, although we did take your suggestions, specifically the make some of it more generalized rather than, you know, our password is this, this, and this, but, you know, say that we have strong two-part passwords. Or the other thing we wanted to add to it was a glossary so that we can be consistent with our terms, and where we need to be more specific rather than general, or when we discuss potential threats, that rather than say just a hack, you say denial of services attack, or you say phishing attack, or you say, you know, so that it's important to be specific so that, especially when dealing with an incident, that you lay out terms specifically, and so you don't, not only do you give more sense that you know what's going on, but you also don't have this generic term out there that people can add their own interpretations to. So really, do you have any questions? Because I don't have that updated.
Do you anticipate having that for the July meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then make it public here, probably soon after that meeting is over, subject to whatever input we may receive from this group. For your information, the Arizona Secretary of State has a gentleman by the name of Ken Mata. That last name is spelled M-A-T-T-A. And he's been with the Arizona Secretary of State's office for quite a while, and I mean in previous administrations, not just Reagan administration. Very knowledgeable about tabulation, and probably even more knowledgeable in areas that I'm not aware of. But he has recently started some WebEx conversations with recorders, county IT staff, not necessarily elections or recorders IT, but county IT staffs, about cybersecurity. Those meetings are going forward. I believe the intention of the Arizona Secretary of State is to provide a threat assessment or review, however it might be viewed, to all counties at no cost going forward. The clock is running to get this done before the primary election. I'm not certain whether that's going to be done. But efforts pertaining to security aren't happening just here locally, they're happening at the state level as well. So we'll try and keep you apprised of that. When's the next meeting? Do you recall for Ken? Next month or 2 weeks from now?
Next month.
Okay.
I had a conversation with them a couple months ago about this very topic, and I was like, yeah, we should do that too.
Well, the ball is rolling right now. We had a threat assessment done by the county IT staff as well. I'm not certain you all have been provided with that information, but we'll get that information to you as well.
It definitely would be interesting to look at.
Okay. I can't think of anything else pertaining to security, but Brian?
The vulnerable point, or the way I see the vulnerable point, isn't as much the elections department as it is the Secretary of State and the reporter, just because those are the people that are tied into the internet. You know, the tabulation piece, because we're completely isolated. You know, is it foolproof and impenetrable? Probably not. It would be interesting to see somebody penetrate. The bigger issue is the effect on tabulation, because you have a number of, for lack of a better term, phantom registrations, which would be a penetration into either the recorder's database or the Secretary of State's database. So it will be interesting to see what the Secretary of State does as far as vulnerability is concerned from an electronic perspective with the voter registration database. That to me anyhow is the bone of contention. You know, I have found, stumbled across, for lack of a better term, at the, I can't remember where it is, it's a college of law that does a lot of election work, and they're looking at legislation across the country that has been proposed and or passed and or signed into law regarding election security or voter suppression or voter rights. And when I look at the stuff that they say is a concern from a security perspective, I haven't found anything that they've recommended yet that we don't do. You know, it's getting rid of electronic tabulating voting machines that don't have a paper trail, don't read paper ballots. And if you have electronic tabulating voting machines, then find a way to have a paper ballot to back that up, something that can't be forged or inserted. So I think from an elections perspective, I haven't seen anything out there as a recommendation that we have implemented in some way, shape, or form in the county. So to the extent that I can feel comfortable that we're providing a very robust and very secure environment from a vote tabulation perspective, I really don't know that we can do anything that we're not currently doing now. I don't have that robust feeling when it comes to voter registration and the Secretary of State's database. I mean, if there's a vulnerability, that's where it is, and we obviously have limited influence in that area, but it would be nice to know what's going on and what they're doing to keep that from happening, Chris.
Yeah. I forget how many months ago it was, you know, when, I think it was it you, Arnie, that was with me? When we went over to FN's, and, you know, we were very impressed with the security she's got. But, yeah, if somebody's going to register a false name or whatever, or that's going to be probably the most vulnerable, because my impression of what the election department does, unless you've got about 5 people on the inside, you're not going to be changing the votes.
One of the biggest issues, and I think we touched on when you presented the security plan at first.
Bill, sorry to interrupt for a minute. Or those are people calling me.
This is Brad Nelson. Who do I have on the phone, please?
Well, good morning, Brad. This is Steve Pearson with ES&S.
Right.
Hi, Brad. This is Chris Wlaschin, Vice President of Security for ES&S.
Great. Give us a couple of seconds to prep for your guys' presentation. We have a room of about a dozen people here. The vast majority of them are members of the Elections Integrity Committee. We are speaking on a conference call phone, so hopefully as you speak and as we speak, we are going to hear one another. So if you need us on our end to repeat something, we'll let you know, and I hope that's vice versa as well. We are preparing the screen and the PowerPoint presentation as we speak. I'm looking forward to a fruitful discussion today. I am not the chair of this committee, so I'm going to look at the chair and our PowerPoint person and ask whether we are ready to go.
From the chair's perspective, we're ready to go.
All right, just a moment while we get the PowerPoint ready to go.
That's not Tucson.
That is not too.
And you're loud and clear on our end.
Thank you so much. Steve, I've given a little bit of an introduction on who you are and what you do. I have not had the opportunity or pleasure of meeting Chris yet, so what little I know about Chris, I try to include in this brief discussion this morning, but if you or Chris want to give your credentials, if you will, that would be appreciated as well. We do have one member of the committee on the phone with you, and that's Mr. Urken. And so, Mike, are we ready?
We're ready. We're at the introductions.
All right, so we are at the introduction screen, Steve, and the floor is yours.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity for Chris and I to join your meeting. And answer, we're here to answer any questions that you might have about ES&S, our commitment to security, and our products, as well as the testing process that we partake in under the EAC program with the voting system test labs. I am the Senior Vice President of Certification. I've been with ES&S for 17 years. Been in this capacity for most of those years. I've served a variety of other roles. I've managed some of the development teams from the product requirements, the product management teams. I've managed QA in addition. I also manage our technical services group, which is responsible for the implementation, the installation implementation of our voting systems from a central standpoint for all of the network, PC, servers, that portion of it. But my primary role in the company is to oversee the EAC testing program, working with the voting system test labs, and all of the state certification responsibilities that go along with that. Just to give you a little bit of background on ES&S, we have a dedicated team committed to federal testing alone. We have our own pre-certification test lab here where we pre-test all items before we go into the federal testing here. And then once we get through the federal test process, we also have a dedicated team. We have 4 dedicated state certification managers that are assigned territories, regions of the state. And many of these have been doing this for a number of years, so they're very familiar with the state statutes, the customers, the variety of rules and differences with each. So that kind of gives you an overview of my responsibility at ES&S. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Wlaschin. I'm the Vice President of Systems Security at ES&S. I've been a cybersecurity practitioner in both government and the private industry for 20 plus years. Started my career in the Navy with computer security on submarines and aircraft carriers, and then moved to private industry where I worked in organizations large and small, and I'm thrilled to be a part of the ES&S team. While my title is Vice President of Systems Security and my focus is on product security, we have a number of areas of security at ES&S that we focus on. They have to do with the physical security of our facilities and how we bring users into our networks, to product security. You're going to hear about some of that today, hardware and software security. We spend a lot of time on our corporate IT security, making sure that the networks that we utilize to build, design, and test, and deliver secure voting systems and software to our customers is secure. And then our stakeholder engagement. We're working closely with Homeland Security, the Multi-State Information and Sharing and Analysis Center, MSISAC, the Elections ISAC, and other organizations to ensure that everything we do, from hardware to software to service delivery, is to the highest standards and best practices. So with that, over to Steve. Any questions before we move on? Okay. Well, let's move forward to the slide entitled "Our Commitment to Security," or our mission. And I thought it was pertinent to put this up here. You know, as you all know, our world's changed a little over a couple of years, about 2 years ago, with all the dynamics around the concerns about elections being rigged, et cetera, et cetera. And it really brought the focus and the emphasis on the need for higher levels of security and awareness around security of our voting systems. And I say this, I wanted to put our mission statement up here because this truly is what drives ES&S, and it's to provide valuable, trusted, and proven election equipment and services to our election administrators continue to evolve as technologies and your needs change, and always deliver the highest level of standards, accuracy, security, and reliability in our election products and services. And so that last bullet there, it's been incredible. And I've done this for 17 years, and it's just flown by, but I've never in the last 2 years seen anything like what we've seen in this time frame. And we recognized quickly that we needed to step up our game and take security to a higher level. And really to emphasize that, we've always had good security practices here, but immediately we began the search to find someone of Chris's caliber to bring in and help take us to that next level. So we've made a lot of good progress over the last, I would say, 12 months in doing that, and we continue to find ways to improve in all areas of our business. So I think that at that point now, I guess, Chris, why don't we move to the next slide then, and why don't you just kind of describe some of what the areas that you've done. You mentioned them briefly there, but let's go through these and talk about some of the things we're doing now in these areas, these 4 different areas here. Sure. So we're on the slide where it says designing and building. So as I moved to ES&S from my previous job, so I was the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. So I oversaw cybersecurity for organizations like the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Disease Control, National Institutes of Health, Medicare, Medicaid, et cetera. And what I learned there and what I am seeing at ES&S is a true commitment to designing, building, and testing and delivering secure systems. And how do we do that? Through the thorough understanding and application of standards. You may be aware that the Center for Internet Security recently produced a handbook for elections infrastructure security. ES&S not only adopted that book, but we helped CIS, the Center for Internet Security, write it, crafting very strong, very actionable guidelines and recommendations for how to secure election systems and software, and we are incorporating those. We have incorporated those into our security ecosystem at ES&S. As the bullet says, we recently added an executive, that's me, so solely focused on security, not just our networks, but our voting systems, and maybe most importantly, our partnership with our customers. As you know, you've all been in elections for some time. You've all had to interact with other county or district or state agencies. You know that your cybersecurity is only as strong as your weakest link. Anybody in your network, in your ecosystem, can be a vulnerability. So ES&S is focusing on the education, training, and development of our customers to make sure that when we deliver a secure and certified voting system or piece of software, that you know how to keep it that way, how to train your individuals, your election officials, your poll workers to maintain the security of the systems and software. So that partnership is something that we're really focusing on. Next slide, please. Steve's going to spend considerable time talking about testing. In my professional career, have never seen a more rigorous testing program than exists at ES&S and in our partnerships with the voting system test labs. If you are interested in independent, third-party, rigorous testing to make sure that these systems are delivered, manufactured and delivered as designed, you're going to hear about it. We have a tremendous testing program, both in-house and through the EAC's requirements to use voting system test labs or VISTLs. And you'll be hearing about that in depth. And then let me finish this slide simply by saying we are delivering security seminars to county and state election officials all across the country. And your team, were we to schedule one of these with you, it's about 4 hours in length. It's not a sales presentation. It's talking in depth about all the security controls, layered, in-depth security controls that we apply to our systems and software, and would really create an understanding for you, help you answer questions from the media and the Secretary of the State's office about the security of your vendor. So with that, let me pass it back to Steve. Next slide, where we can start talking about some in-depth information.
Steve, are you there?
Did we lose you?
Chris,
Oh, here I am. Head on mute. Yeah. So before we move to that next federal certification slide, are there any questions or dialogue you'd like to have with what Chris just explained?
This is Steve Pothier. Chris, you mentioned the Sharing and Analysis Center. Is there some way we can find out more about what that does and provides?
Absolutely, sir. We will send you a link through Brad with some information that talks about the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Just briefly, if you'll allow me, they are providing a connection to and access to information developed over a nationwide network of election officials. I believe they have 700 jurisdictions signed up, and they are sharing information, cyber threat information that's specifically focused on elections and voting systems. So this partnership that the MSISAC built and is growing, I think would be very beneficial to you. We will send you the information on how to join it. It's free to state and local election organizations, tribal and territorial. We'll get that information right to you.
Excellent, thank you.
Hi,
Any other questions?
Yeah.
I have a couple of short questions just to have a different point of view. To what extent does your organization use red team testing to evaluate the security of your software production system?
Thank you for that question. So ES&S has a very robust code development system. Let me just make a couple of comments about the context, and then I'll talk about how we test it. Our software code development process involves a library of certified and proven code that we manage to check in and check out of the code repository. We manage changes to that. We limit access to the code repository. So any code we develop that goes into our systems is carefully managed. The software change control process, the software lifecycle development process is followed rigorously to make sure that only authorized individuals have access to that code, and that only approved versions make it through our development, our test, our QA, and into production. Now, regarding your specific question about red teaming, we have a series of individuals who collaborate on peer code reviews. So as each piece of the code meets a milestone for advancement to the next stage, it is rigorously reviewed by other individuals in our team to make sure that no spurious or unapproved additions or changes make it into that code. We follow this every step of the way and every milestone in our software development life cycle. And once that code is placed into a certification process, it is held very closely. And I'll let Steve talk a little bit about what the test labs do with that code and how they test it.
Right, I do have some bullets that we were going to address that, but we can talk about that piece of it now. You know, in addition to what Chris mentioned, you know, we run assessments on we run SCAP reports, we run tools such as Nessus and others against all of our code to look for identify any vulnerabilities. We also work closely with, as you know, a number of states, including the state of Arizona, but we have a number of other states that have independent certification test campaigns where all of our systems are subjected to rigorous red team review as well. In addition to that, we engage independent firms to, and on one of the slides there, I put one of the names up there was a company called Bulletproof, which is a sister company to SLI, which is one of the accredited voting system test labs, and that's specifically what they do. They do penetration testing, they do just full red team assessments, and so we use Bulletproof. We use a number of other companies to do the same type of service for us. So we not only have those procedures in-house, but we go outside as well with that.
May I ask this? My name's John Cote. I'm new to this. This is my first formal meeting, so I beg your indulgence with what may turn out to be not such a bright question. The cyber kind of security problems we've had in the past in this country seem to be caused by people who are already within the system and seem to leak it out, i.e. the WikiLeaks and the more recent issues with other folks who've been involved either in the Navy or the Army or wherever. This seems like a pretty broad process, pretty broad dissemination of the code. How do we, as civilians, so to speak, begin to feel comfortable that this hasn't already happened or is ongoing or will happen within the code and the programs that you're developing?
Well, this is Chris. Let me take a crack at that first, and then Steve fill in the blanks. Our software is that we use to develop election systems and software is proprietary. Yes, we use Microsoft and Linux operating systems for the basic functions of some of our devices, but the actual code that we develop is proprietary, and the only people that we share it with is the organizations that we contract with to do the red teaming, the security testing, and the voting system test lab. And once that code is certified, the EAT gets a controlled copy of it, and the access to this code at every step of the way is monitored and logged. So we know who touches what and where it goes and for what reason. Steve, over to you for additional details.
I think you summarized that very well. You know, obviously the source code being proprietary, it is extremely important to us, and I think we take very extreme measures to protect any access to that. So I don't know what else I can add. If there's any other additional questions of that, you know, once we submit the code to the lab, you know, it's their responsibility to protect that code. It's the same with the EAC. So, and we also, in addition, we use like companies like Iron Mountain, where we always store the code as well, so that we have backup in secure locations as well. So I think the code is well protected. The source code and any executables have the same degree of protection as well.
So my question really goes to the, this is John Cote again, just as a follow-up. So my question really goes to the nature of how you protect the sharing of the fox that's already in the hen house, so to speak. The issues, the grand issues that seem to be coming out seem to be coming from internal disgruntled employees or disgruntled individuals who have the broad knowledge and basis that you guys have, and then they somehow share it with others or get paid to share it with others. What kind of internal security system do you have to follow with your employees and your code writers and such to see that they're, in fact, their loyalty and their obligations are being followed, follow how you would like for them to be followed and not how we would fear they might be?
Great question, John. This is Chris again. You're referring to that insider threat portion of a cybersecurity program. ES&S has a very robust insider threat protection scheme. It starts with background checks of all employees. Anybody who comes to work for ES&S is thoroughly vetted through background check to make sure that there are no issues in their background that would give us pause from giving them access to our systems or software. Code developers undergo rigorous training, and we require a series of certifications that those folks have before they ever touch our code. They are trained side by side with experienced coders to make sure that they learn our processes before they're given access to production code. The computers that we store our source code on have very, very limited access, and a supervisor has to approve a code developer or code writer's access to that. We monitor that access. As I mentioned previously, code that is checked out of our secure library, any changes made to it is monitored and audited before it's checked back in. A number of people see that code and approve it before it ever makes it into production. We require all employees to sign non-disclosure agreements that have significant consequences should they violate any elements of their employment agreement. And we prosecute vigorously any transgression or violation of the non-disclosure agreement. I hope that answers your question. Certainly able to provide additional information should you need it.
I think I still have some questions in my own mind because once again, the guy that's on the inside is not going to and wants to do something nefarious, won't disclose to you that he's thinking about doing something nefarious. I suppose the only way you can look after this to see whether you've got a fox in the hen house, so to speak, is to do periodic, lie detector tests, whatever you want to call it, to see how people are doing. I wonder if you do any of that, even if on random.
So this is Chris again, we have not conducted lie detector tests. What I did not mention to you though is that our network has internal monitoring controls that are active 24/7. If we notice an employee doing something that they shouldn't be doing, the IT security people and myself are alerted to this fact. So while no internal insider threat program is perfect, you can ask the NSA or CIA, they've had some serious issues there. While no program is perfect, we believe we have sufficient layered steps to detect that kind of nefarious activity that you're talking about. But happy to follow up with you, sir, on additional questions you may have.
I'll save it for later and let someone else
One
ask.
other aspect of that, to provide some level of assurance with respect to the software that's used in the voting systems itself. When we submit our systems to the voting system test labs for review, every line of code in the system is reviewed and for compliance and integrity. So any modifications that would be made, and they maintain that base code set, and any modifications made thereafter, they do a compare. So there is no line of code that is not reviewed independently by the voting system test lab as well. So it gives some assurance that some nefarious code is not being entered into the system, because once we turn it over to the lab, it's basically in their hands, and they control the access to it, as well as the review of that code for integrity. I heard another question.
Yeah, this is Arnie Urken. I think you have a very impressive system for trying to ensure security, but as you say, it's a constant battle. But one of the things that has been a problem with some of the vendors we've spoken to is the question of whether they support alternative voting systems like rank order voting, which is becoming more popular and has been adopted by more cities and states. Does your system support that? And how do you test for that?
We do have a solution for ranked choice voting. That is essentially it runs on a separate platform. So with our core system that is lockdown certified configuration, we provided export that would be then brought over to the separate system where the ranked choice voting algorithm would run. That application then would run. So that we take great effort and strides to lock down that certified configuration of the core voting system, and then we provide access to some peripheral applications like this one, so that the results cannot be impacted or manipulated in any way with the core system.
Is that application something that you develop internally, or do you, what is the name of that application?
So we have, what do we name that, Chris? The state of Maine just used the application. It's just ranked choice voting. I can't remember what the product name is. Yeah, it's one that we developed and was tested. Before we go to any state to utilize that tool, and then we go through like a certification process with them to make sure, so that they evaluate and they would approve any of these additional algorithms that are run outside of the core voting system.
I'd be interested in learning more about how errors in computation and reallocation of votes within the rank order system, depending on which voting systems you use.
Arnie, this is Brian. I can appreciate your concern and your interest, but we don't do rank order, and we have a limited amount of time, and I'm sure ES&S would be happy to provide you with information, but since it's not a product that we use or a product that we're planning on using anytime soon, can we get on with something that's germane to what we're currently doing?
The question is still relevant because it's supposed to be a standard provided that we could make use of if we wanted to.
And when we get to the point where we decide we're going to make use of it, when somebody besides this commission makes that decision, I'd be happy to entertain that discussion at length.
Well, I think it's putting the cart before the horse. The question is, does the software comply with all the standards that other states like Maine can expect to make use of or not? Something we can handle separately.
Yeah, and each state has their own set of specific requirements.
Yeah, the question is not the specific requirements, but with other alternative systems, and rank order voting is one of them, there has to be a good match between the engineering capabilities of the hardware and the demands of the software in computing and tabulating voting information reliably. Did you provide guidance, for example, in the state of Maine to make sure that their hardware is adequately designed to meet the demands of all the software tools you provide?
Yeah, with all of our systems, we define a set of specifications from the hardware standpoint. So all of the third-party hardware is specifications are defined for minimum performance levels. Yeah, it's very thorough on that. And you know,
you've got
at any time you could go out and you could evaluate, because they're public documents. documents on the EAC's website, you can see test reports that will provide down, you'll see some of the specifications that are, the level of specifications that are from a hardware standpoint and operating environment standpoint that each of the manufacturers publish in those test reports.
Steve and Chris, this is Brad, just for your information. In order to go to ranked choice voting within the state of Arizona at the state, county, or federal level, we're going to have to change the state constitution, and that doesn't happen too often. But there in the state constitution right now, it says the person with the most votes wins. Not with the most votes allocated to them, but the person with the most votes wins. So ranked choice voting
Well,
is...
this is Chris. When that change happens, we'll support it.
Let's move on.
Go ahead with your presentation.
Move on, please.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the federal certification page. We ES&S, we've been certifying systems, and really we're probably the biggest proponent of the EAC testing program. We've certified 19 systems to date. We have one pending that should be approved here within days. So we'll be at the 20 release mark under the EAC program. In addition to that, we've certified with voting system test labs for other releases at states that don't require EAC certification. We use only EAC accredited test labs for additional testing, and we really have dozens of successful test campaigns utilizing the program and the standards of the federal the VVSG. Today, there's only 2 accredited test labs that we use, and we use at both of them. SLI, they're headquartered in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and we use POV&B, which they're in Huntsville, Alabama. So from a security standpoint, just to give you an overview of that, from a security standpoint, all of our components of the systems are hashed and hash verified. We are required to produce software validation procedures for each of those components so that our customers, the counties, have the ability to ensure that the firmware or the software that is installed on any one of the components, you have the ability to run hash validation procedures from hash values that were produced during the federal testing that you can do the compare. So you could actually run hash validation prior to each election and then after each election. And we do have customers that do that, just to assure that that none of the firmware or software that has been compromised or tampered with in any way. All of our data is FIPS 140-2 compliant. Any transportable data is also digitally signed as well. So any data that goes on media that will be transported in either direction, whether to the voting machine or from the voting machine, with the results, then are FIPS 140-2 encrypted and digitally verified at both ends. One other security aspect is we do not allow any USB media outside of the certified media that is used in testing. Delkin is a manufacturer that we've used for years that has created what we would consider a proprietary USB because it has an ES&S ID embedded in the register of the system of the media, so that should someone try to insert or insert any other type of media that is not a trusted media that has been through all of the environmental testing for reliability and accuracy, but also if it was a nefarious person trying to introduce something to the system, it would not be allowed. And on the next couple slides, you'll see that we also have implemented strong user access controls throughout our systems at all levels. We'll move to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about same. We only install, implement, and certify systems where those environments are locked down, meaning that only the essential applications that are required to run the EMS environment, are allowed to operate. We disable all access to internet. We disable there's no editors on the system that would allow anybody, so Notepad, there's no Word, there's no Excel, so there's no ability for someone to, even on the inside, that had user access to make any modifications to any of the results data. All of our systems are malware protected. We have antivirus software that we keep current with each release, and we provide updates frequently. And there's absolutely no internet access with any of our systems, and there's two configurations that we support with our customers. There's a standalone environment as well as a client server environment. We have multiple levels of access. So when you start up your EMS environment, the user has to know a boot password to be able to continue to allow the Windows operating system to go ahead and launch. And then once it does, then to access the electroware application and our ERM application, then you would need to have, there's multiple passwords there, the sysadmin, and there's the EA admin, which would have access to only the ES&S programs. We've implemented strong password capabilities, and we recommend as best practices that the counties utilize those to maintain good, strong strength with those. All of our passwords expire within every 90 days, so that for every election, you're required to, the election administrator would then be required to establish new password access to the system. We'll move on to the next slide. Again, in the EMS environment, the access controls, username, password required for entry, election administrator creates. It's really the e-admin that they would create the users, and we can have multiple different levels of users. So if you wanted to have people that could only read in the unofficial results, they would not have access to anything else. The system can be set up in that manner. Tabulation hardware access controls, all of the tabulation hardware, same thing. We have password entry for loading the election, as well as entering into the administrative menus as well. And as I mentioned here, there's optional passwords to close the polls as well at the polling place. Physical security. Locks and tamper evidence seals on all of the devices. As I mentioned earlier, we support only ES&S, Delkin, USB media in the systems. We've actually even created a new tool working with Delkin here over the last 6 months, recognizing how critical it would be to be able to use following one election and prior to the next election, when you want to reuse media, oftentimes you might not, while we recommend all media be locked at all times when not in use, as an insurance policy to ensure that nobody has tampered with that media, there hasn't been any malware introduced on that media before you would plug it into the EMS environment. We've worked with Delkin to create a separate tool that our customers will be able to use in what we call our toolbox application, which runs on a separate system. So it will allow you to cleanse that device. And what it does is, there's other tools that will allow you to do it, but they take an inordinate amount of time. And what we decided would be best would be to provide a fast, efficient means for counties to be able to restore their media back to a factory state, but protecting that ES&S system ID in there. So it would be analogous to, if you think about a surgeon getting ready to go into surgery, they would back to its factory state, take it directly over the system. When you introduce it into the system, it will first of all validate that it's a valid USB, and then secondly, it will run the format process to format that USB media for reuse in the next election. So these are just some of the things that we're doing. I'm not sure other folks are doing the same thing, but we're always, on the forefront now of providing every means that we can to ensure that the integrity is not compromised in that EMS environment, even though it's in a locked, back office environment with supposedly trusted people. Let's move on to the next slide. It's entitled Product Security, Encryption, and Digital Signatures. As I mentioned, our systems, we only use NIST-approved cryptographic modules. We continually monitor the NIST website for items that have been moved to the historical list. We upgrade our cryptographic modules generally annually. They're usually out there for at least 18 months accredited, but should there be any cryptographic vulnerabilities that are identified with any of the modules that we use, then we upgrade them immediately. We use AES 256 encryption, RSA, BSafe, the crypto library, and the OpenSSL for digital signatures in our systems. System logs, all activity is logged. We have the Windows log is active at all times, and we also have audit logs, user logs, where every activity on any of the devices, whether it's in the EMS environment or any one of the tabulators, all actions, all activities are logged. Should someone, such as a sysadmin, go in and disable a log, the system won't operate. So we require logs, our audit logs, to be active at all times in order to use the system as an insurance policy against nefarious actors in getting into the systems. Any questions about that before I move on?
Yes, Chris Cole here. You say that you have, the logging must be active to operate the system. What safeguards do you have to prevent the log from being erased after the system is used?
Well, all of our logs are continually backed up, so they're replicated, and if a log file is missing, the system won't operate. And these are all things that are tested during the EAC test campaign to validate these designs. It's really as a protection for the integrity of the system. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, let's move to the next slide then. We're going to jump in now to the EAC Missile Security Test process. And I know that was the primary emphasis and focus of this call. VVSG Volume 1, Section 7, all of the test plans that we use, they create all of their test cases are driven by meeting this requirement. And so what I've done here is just essentially taking the high-level requirements in that section and summarize them here. So you can, if you have the opportunity, it would be good that document is available on the EAC's website. You'd all be welcome to go read that. I think it would be very good for everybody to understand how comprehensive the requirements are, and in addition to the testing and the validation of those security requirements during the test campaign. I mentioned a number of these, on previous slides about unauthorized access. They test for deletion and modification of data. They verify all audit data is there, is 175 separate documents, several of which are designed specifically around software design specs, hardware design specs, and security specifications. Each one of those documents are validated during the lab's testing. So every action that they take, they validate and confirm that our documentation meets the operation of the system, but also satisfies the requirements of the VBSG. We have a security best practices document that is should be fundamental to every one of our customers, and we strongly recommend it be followed to a T. The Wiseley, the Voting System Test Lab, they rigorously test those procedures to ensure that they are valid and thorough. They also, each one of the labs, they each have their own set databases with known vulnerabilities, and they create their own set of tests where they'll do vulnerability testing, independent negative testing against the system, and try to penetrate the system as well. In testing, the last bullet in testing is done at each of the component levels and then on up to system-wide for all operations and from a security viewpoint. A couple more examples on the next slide. See things that we haven't talked about already. I think we talked about the first three bullets. The software security, I mentioned, we issue SCAP reports to evaluate that for our system during every test campaign. Nessus is run against our systems to make sure that our systems are current and there's no high vulnerabilities. Any vulnerabilities that are identified that are critical or high or even medium, the labs will investigate and we have to provide answers to. Very rigorous, very thorough process there. We're tested for and evaluated for our software firmware distribution procedures. We need to protect that data. All that data on any one of those, the media that would be used for distribution, it's all encrypted, it's digitally signed as well and verified. All of our components have protection against malicious, anything malicious on the system. And as I mentioned, all software components are hashed. There's digital signatures validation at all points in the systems. And we also talked about source code review. The most recent system we just submitted, we just completed testing on the REVS 6000 release. There's 3.9 million lines of code system-wide in that, and the voting system test lab reviewed every line. Part of the review is they develop, they use products to do some automated test review, but they also do a sampling of probably 20%, roughly 25% of manual review of the software as well, with the source code. They test for all communication, telecommunications. The networks, they test the networks. We do network, like our central tabulators have the ability to be networked directly to the electionware EMS platform in that back office for the transfer of data. They test those for the integrity and external threat detection and protection as well. I encourage you all to feel free to go to the standards and read through them. It's reassuring to understand the level and the rigor that these systems undergo. For instance, a typical test campaign on the order of this release that we just submitted, it was approximately an 18-month program that the EAC and the accredited lab evaluated our system. So any questions? The next slide there is an interesting one, but it basically summarizes it gives you a picture
Thank you, Steve. This is you've been talking a lot, you did a great job explaining all those test elements that we get tested on. This slide is designed to put it all together for folks who like pictures of security controls. This one has it. Down the left-hand side, in that red column, it says ES&S voting system security overview. There are a couple of icons, a couple of pictures, one that's called hash validations, one's called digital signatures, encryption keys, certified USB media, and then user access controls. So each of those icons is present, and in some cases, more than one, in each step of the election process. So the red square in the upper left there that says electionware EMS, you can see that we have digital signatures, encryption keys. We control user access to that. Moving to the right, the removable media, the election stick, and the polling place media, all are subjected to encryption keys, hash validations, and digital signatures. When any of that media is plugged into a ballot marking device, a voting machine, or a tabulator, there's a secure encrypted handshake that makes sure that only ES&S thumb drives or removable media are plugged in and recognized by these devices. Each of the transmissions is hashed and digitally signed. Moving from tabulation in the lower right, where unofficial results are collected, and then move to the central polling place or the election headquarters, whether it's removable media or transmission of unofficial results. All of those devices are secure from end to end. The transmissions themselves are encrypted using NIST FIPS 140 encryption standards. So this picture is designed to show you in graphic representation that every step of election, the conduct of elections, from planning the ballots to enabling the software, to activating the polling places, to the collection of unofficial results, to the reporting of results, has security built in. Steve covered all of this in great detail. This picture is trying to help you put it together. But here's where we pause and ask for any kind of questions or discussion about our focus on security.
Just a quick question. What's the DMZ?
DMZ stands for demilitarized zone. That is the area where encrypted unofficial results can be transmitted if the state or the jurisdiction allows electronic transmission. We set up that communications between the electionware and the election night reporting the results to make sure that the data is encrypted, the handshake between the two devices is encrypted, and that only authorized users can get to it.
Keep the North Korean hackers out.
May I ask, what is the blue check? How is that distinguished from the green checks on your key?
So each piece of election, each electronic piece of media, the thumb drive has an individual encryption key. Each device that you plug into it has an encryption key, and those two keys, a public and a private key, can only be shared between that piece of election media and that device. So that prevents somebody from finding a piece of a USB stick on the street or building one themselves and trying to plug it into one of our devices. If those encryption keys are not present, the device won't work.
And so on the top right side of the screen, there is a arrow that goes one way from the EQC middle pile. What is that intended to be on the right side?
Sure, so that's the election qualification stick. That's the portable media that we plug into the voting device to enable that voting device for that election. So that EQC stick has an encryption key on it. The voting device has an encryption key on it, and those two devices are paired, and only those two devices will work. And then the icons below it show digital signatures and hash validations of any information shown on the voting device.
That's, for us, that's just handicap voting access?
And also, as you see, Steve and Chris, I've had a question asked of me, this is Brad. So the top right device is an express vote, which we use exclusively for ADA here. And then below that express vote icon is an icon that shows the central high-speed tabulation device. So the EQC provides election parameters to those particular devices. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You are correct. So we need to tell the tabulator how to read and count the ballots. So we provide that via a piece of removable media that is plugged into the tabulator or the ballot counting device.
Go ahead and continue, please.
So this is Chris. Just to quickly summarize, all of the various IT security controls that Steve described, everything from the protection of the source code to the design and delivery of the software, to the enabling specific users to access it at different levels, user access control, to the audit logs being present and enabled for the device to work, to the backup of those audit logs in case one, for whatever reason, is corrupted or somebody nefariously tries to disable it. All of these controls, by themselves, individually, would not stop a nefarious actor. But when you apply all of the controls in a layered environment the way we have, so that the controls interrelate, and when you combine that with a trained and trusted poll worker or election official, we believe that combination, that partnership of hardware and software controls, trained and alert poll workers and election officials, make our system the most secure in the industry. It's that partnership, that training, and the emphasis we put on security from design to delivery is why you can be assured that ES&S voting systems and software will deliver a secure, accurate, and transparent election. With that, let's open it to questions in the few minutes we have left.
All right, Levoy, Hurley, I'll put my foot in here. Dumb question, where's the paper trail?
Well, we don't illustrate it in this document. So this system here is a paper-based system. So when each voter, like on the express vote, are you familiar with the express vote and the activation card there?
No.
Okay, so the system that Pima County uses, as Brad mentioned, you utilize the express vote, which is it's really a marking device. So to activate the machine, you are given a 4.5 by 11, 14, or 17-inch blank thermal card. Once the voter checks in to the polling place, they verify it's the right voter, that they're at the right polling location, they're given an activation card. It's a blank card. They would walk over, insert it into the machine. It would then activate their voting session. And so they would go ahead and make their selections. At the end of the voting session, then they're presented with a summary of their selections and given the opportunity to modify those, change those, and correct those if they made an error the first time through. Once they have confirmed that their selections are correct, they go ahead and they print the card. And what the system does then is it goes ahead and it prints each of their selections that Pima County has DS200s.
No.
The voter then would walk over and insert that into the DS200, which would then do the scanning. Then at that point, it will scan that card that was produced by the express vote. It will store those votes, and it will drop that card into a secure container in a ballot box sitting below that DS200.
Just for the record, Pima County does not use precinct scanners.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A sore point for some of us.
Yeah, so if you brought, the voters then would then, in that case, Brad, consider, do you have ballot boxes then that they deposit those cards in?
That's correct.
And return to central then for tabulation?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay. So either way, it's either tabulated, throughout the country, they're either tabulated at the polling place or they're brought back into central. And at the central site, generally there'll be a central scanner there, like one of our DS450s or DS850, or even some smaller jurisdictions will use the DS200 that is pictured there back at the central site to tabulate.
Steve, this is Brad. I'm going to interrupt here a little bit. So to be clear, here in Pima County, everybody who votes is going to have a ballot that they are able to verify that that ballot is a reflection of how they choose to cast a ballot. That ballot is then counted at a central location. That ballot is then subject to random hand count audit as well. So there is a paper trail that's voter verified for each and every voter in Pima County.
If I could add one more thing, your representation is fine, but if verify for me that this is correct. Basically, your system has 4 points of entry where these outside media can be used to transfer information. That's the handicap-assisted device, a precinct scanner if it is used, the central count location if it is used, and a e-poll book of some type to verify voter registration. Those are the 4 main ways in which that electronic data would be transferred from the management system to an outside device of some kind, correct?
When you say an outside device?
A device that's not directly attached to the central EMS, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. That media there, that you can see down below there at the bottom, you'll see that represents the unofficial results being brought back into the central site for tabulation, accumulation, and reporting, I should say.
If I may, this is John Cote again, just first visit here to this committee. And most of our ballots, are they not, are vote by mail, absentee ballots. And where do they fit in this chart?
Central count.
Central count.
Right there. And the ones that we were talking about fall under, just now, they also fall under that same process.
Everything goes through central.
Yeah.
So everything's central count. So on this display, there's 3 things there. We determine we don't use the scanner, which is the central
The precinct scanner.
pre-scanner, and then there's what is at the bottom with it looks like a screen.
Yeah, the one at the bottom is another product that it's called Express Touch. It is a DRE, which is it's a touch screen and tabulator. And there are still a number of states that use the DRE technology, and that's what that device is.
So from our perspective here, we have everything comes from a central compiler, so to speak, processor. And the 2 items
For
that
you,
are
it's really the upper half of that diagram pertains to Pima County.
The handicap device, which relatively speaking, few voters utilize in Pima County. There are some, but it's not huge numbers. The central count is the main one.
May I have a question? we have some extremely skeptical people in our community who refer to the Volkswagen incident where you use one program for testing and another when they're actually driving. And they claim that it's possible to have two programs for the same election. So you can have, when the system's being tested, and have the program count everything correctly, and then somebody switches a button, and there's another program that counts them incorrectly. Is this possible?
No.
Good.
So we're the only.
This is Chris, I'd like to take that. No.
Okay, go ahead.
The answer to that is no, because during the setup of these systems before election night, there's significant logic and accuracy testing that takes place in the presence of election officials, sometimes party observers, and public is often invited to observe these, and then ES&S support people are standing by. Once the logic and accuracy tests take place, those systems are secured in the central count room or in the polling place, and the removable media is held by the election official and not distributed in any way until the election official decides to do so. So all of the rigorous voting system testing that takes place in the design, build, and delivery of this ensures that on election day, the election official has the single approved version of the software, and nothing else will work.
Thank you.
That is true. There's one other aspect I'd like to add. Even when we go through the hardware testing, the environmental and electrical testing, that each one of those components on the right-hand side are subjected to under the federal standards. Some of those are in chambers where there's high radiation, there's all emissions, there's all types of testing where a human would not enter the room. So all of it, we have to develop test routines that would automate the testing in those environments to make sure that the environment is not impacting the operation of the machine. They are required to execute the exact code that is used on election day in those automated routines even. And the labs validate that. They'll do a source code and a logic analysis to ensure that even those test routines are exercising the exact same code that is done on election day. So yeah, just to clarify, that is not the case, even though folks might make that claim.
Thank you.
Steve and Chris, for your information, here in Pima County, we also utilize two-part passwords where person A knows only one part of the password and person B knows another. So no one single individual has the ability to change anything.
Very nice. This is Chris. That appeals to another level of security that local officials have applied to ensure the integrity. Great job.
Do we,
Don, I want to ask a couple of questions about your ideas about product development. In particular, we've been concerned with auditing and different attempts in academic and other state communities to do sampling to ensure the reliability of the final vote outcome. And also, there have been some disturbing results of, for example, in Maryland with clear ballot auditing of election results, which is a different standard of auditing. And I'm wondering if you could comment on those, both the statistical auditing and the kind of clear ballot auditing, just to say if you think that is a desirable direction to go in with respect to the future of your product.
The risk limiting audits, and it is an interesting concept and it's a valid concept. However, it's interesting that the risk limiting audit software or systems do not undergo any federal testing or certification like the voting systems do. And in each voting system, each of the manufacturers, there's different thresholds for what constitutes a valid mark or an indeterminate mark. And so I find it interesting, we all do in the industry, undergo the rigorous testing and the 1.5 million mark test that we are required to run or to complete with 100% accuracy, using not just fully filled ovals, but ovals that are filled to our minimum specifications, which each manufacturer varies on. We have the lowest requirements from anybody in the industry when we define the width and the length of a line within an oval. I find it interesting, though, that the RLA processes there are not certified processes. It is a method that is used, and it does give you feedback, and it helps you identify, things that you can do different before an election to make sure that your machines are PM preventive maintenance is done on them. They're clean, they're calibrated, they're accurate. I think it will expose any voting system where those steps were skipped prior to the election. So I will say preventive maintenance is essential, and testing is essential. And I know Pima County runs probably the best elections in the country. I mean, you've been a great customer of ES&S and a great partner. The integrity of the way you run your systems, Brad. But I think that's an important aspect. So that's my thought on that. There are, with our systems, there's a number of ways to validate the accuracy. We capture images. We have the ability to audit those images. Each one of you can rescan those cards, ballots, etc. on a variety of different platforms that we offer to validate the integrity of the outcome. I don't know, Chris, you want to add anything to that?
We support auditing in all its forms. Each of our devices produces a paper trail, as Steve described above. Any action that's done on a tabulator or a precinct scanner or a central count scanner or a ballot marking device has a log that is available. We support audits. Enough said on that one.
Yeah. Gentlemen, this is Brad.
We had it.
Go ahead, Arnie.
No, I was just going to comment on the experience we had in Pima County exploring the use of this sort of auditing. And one of our former members participated in the Maryland experiment with Clear Ballot, which gives a different level, a different standard of detection for not just ovals, but stray marks on the ballot. And I think, I agree with you that there's some really severe limitation, but I think the aim is laudable. I mean, to try to provide higher levels of security than we currently do. And one of the things that concerns me is that even though you have a very complex system for assuring reliability, the bad guys are always getting more clever. They're finding ways of stressing the system to standard that your testing regimen or the EAC's testing regimen may not currently imagine. So what concerns me is, as a company, where do you see the vulnerabilities in testing that currently exist? What would you, if you had your druthers, what would you do to try to stress these systems with respect to hardware and software to create failures, and give an opportunity for a smart person either to use social engineering or to use the machine to penetrate the system? And that's the most common way of breaking the system, is to distract attention by creating disturbances that haven't been part of the testing regimen, so that somebody can do something that nobody notices.
Arnie, this is Chris. Let me take that one. You may have read press accounts about these security researchers acquiring an older piece of voting equipment
unfettered access. So with unrestricted access and time and tools, it takes several hours for one of these skilled individuals to break into the device, modify the code, and try to produce a result. Mind you, this is on a piece of equipment that was built 15 years ago that we don't sell anymore. Our modern systems have what we've tried to describe here is a number of layered security features, and when those security features are combined with physical access controls, like Pima County keeping their equipment locked up and inventoried, and restricting access to who has them. Rigorous testing prior to the election day, logic and accuracy testing, results testing. These controls in combination will prevent a nefarious bad actor from trying to acquire and hack into a system. I just don't see how one or even a number of bad actors could do what it takes to acquire enough machines to be able to infect them with malware without being detected. Between the controls we've described here today and trained and alert poll workers, that's just not going to happen. Well, I appreciate the attention you give to these issues, but being somewhat of a skeptic, I mean, there are always situations combined previously unnoticed, relatively rare disturbances with some sort of inside access, social engineering access. When you put a gun to somebody's head or you threaten their family, how do you prepare for dealing with those situations? I think it's very difficult to plan and adapt to those kinds of stresses. I don't know, I mean, I don't think the EAC does that, or if they do, that they can assure that that your systems are going to operate in a way to help guard against that.
There's
a great question. Go ahead.
Well, just a couple things on that we've already talked about. Again, it goes back to auditability. Every aspect, we know every user that logged on. We know every action that was taken by every user in the system, and that is logged. And all of those logs are available and should be reviewed to ensure that no nefarious activity had taken place. Secondly, as I mentioned earlier about the hash validation, each one of the systems, these hash procedures, they are very definite on what is certified, what's installed on the system, what was used in the election, and you can verify that before and after you roll that out to the polling place, or in your case, you don't have it rolled out to the polling place. I mean, so it's even more secure or less apt to anybody trying to tamper with one of these systems. Yeah.
Another thing we have is...
Yeah, I just have one last comment on this, if I could. Arnie, even if, so let's say that that scenario you described took place and a certain voting system or even a group of them were compromised and those results were transmitted to the central location. Even if all of that happened, election officials would notice a significant change in a direction that Pima County voters had taken, or maybe a group of candidates or a certain party. If something looked out of whack, if folks voted for a significant increase in a utility district pricing or a candidate, election officials would see those unofficial results and know that something was not following a pattern that Pima County was used to doing. And they would take a look at it and audit it before posting official results. So that final check that election officials perform before they post official results, I think, would catch the kind of anomaly that you're talking about if all our other automated security controls fail. And I'll leave it there. With all due respect, it didn't happen in Maryland. We drafted the election, clear ballot, open assessment data, found that nobody caught
I think we're running up against some time constraints, and I appreciate your concern, Arnie, but I think it's time that we respect the time from both Steve and Chris, and the issues that they can control and can't control. And there are a number of issues on the agenda that still need to be discussed, and I think it's time to move on.
Thank you for your
answering
time.
my questions.
Thank you.
Steve and Chris, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for the presentation. We do have a copy of it available. And with Brad here, we know how to get a hold of you if something comes up in the future that we have continued questions about.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
You all for allowing us to participate.
We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
John and Steve, for your benefit and for anybody else that hasn't participated, since we do have a primary election coming up, something that may answer a number of the questions that you have is to actually participate in the observation process in the elections department. Whether Brad can do that as a member of the ESC, or certainly you can have it done through your respective political party.
May I suggest an amendment, an addendum to that, is participate in the primary process, but the logic and accuracy testing might be the best way to get a lot of the questions answered, because there'll be time to do that as opposed to waiting for the primary election process proper. It's a little before the process. I'm sure you'll have some time to ask some of those questions about, point A to point B to point C, et cetera, and probably will answer a lot of your questions you may have out of today.
And if you do go down on election night, and make sure you bring ear protection. Those machines are noisy.
Boy, if you have an interest in the paper trail, just watching the process as the ballots move from the reporter through and end up in the tabulating room.
Well,
is very informative.
Yeah, interesting, because the presentation did not even talk about the primary piece.
And part
The answer is good. The answer he gave was good.
Yeah, but when you look at the system, what these people deal with is this, and what we're looking at is this. So,
And to further emphasize the point, their presentation, especially the visual graphic, doesn't really show how the paper ballots are tracked from the start of the process through the end of the process, because that's a whole other set of procedures that there are systems in place to do checks on, whether things are followed according to proper procedure. But by showing the graphic the way it doesn't do justice to the fact that the paper ballot, while it is the key part of our system in the state of Arizona, they're not tabulating paper ballots any longer. They're tabulating the image of the ballot, and that's where the graphic might be misleading in the way it's shown out there.
As a newcomer, as someone who's very familiar with process, not electronic process like you guys are doing, although I had managers in the past that did this and reported to me. I'd like to see a flow chart that shows how the ballot gets into the system, how it goes to the various boxes in the precincts, how it's then controlled in terms of chain of control to where it gets to your processing. It seems to me, and maybe this is I saw someone sort of giggle here earlier. We're getting a box in Green Valley and a box in Oro Valley, and somehow they come to a central location. And how do we know we got all the boxes? How do we know all the ballots got in the boxes? How do we know they've maintained control of those boxes and the ballots? There are some advantages to having a transmission device, I suppose, at the precinct level, but we've elected not to do that at Pima County for whatever reason.
Budget reasons.
Budget's fine, it's a good reason. Might not be a thorough reason. What disturbs me when I took this appointment is that we have very little other than our voice that we can do or to influence how this is handled. And we also have big element that's outside of it, which is that falls under Van Rodriguez. So if I could lend my voice to it, I would like to see a flow chart of how the various ballots get into a system, get into a box, get in, and then scanned and entered into a system. And I'd like to understand that that's what we're going to do.
I think that's where observing, the flow chart is really useful, but observing is part of it. It's just, you can come in, you can watch the polling place, you can go start at the recorder's office and watch how they verify signatures. That's very interesting. And then you can watch how the ballots are taken out of the envelope, how they eventually get to the computer. And I would think everybody on this commission should see all parts of that process.
So how do we arrange so that we can observe?
Maybe through the party.
Whether you're appointed by your political party or a board of supervisors or just John Key Public, there are some observation opportunities available to you. There are some areas that you understand from the presentation today that you'll be able to observe and not necessarily touch or things of that nature. But we are open to anything. Next on the agenda, and I don't mean to jump, but what we're talking about is the primary election. For every election, we produce a calendar of events. Here's what's going to happen on this day and the location of where it's going to occur. That's everything from poll worker training classes, for when we expect to receive ballots from the county recorder after they've been verified, when we expect to receive ballots from the printer even before distribution to voters and things of that nature. So I should have a calendar of events by the time we meet in July, perhaps a little sooner as necessary. I do, if anybody's interested, I already have the date, which we'll get into a little bit, of when the official logic and accuracy test is going to be performed. For those who may not understand what the official part of that process is that's when the Arizona Secretary of State comes and does a logic and accuracy test to test the program. However, previous to that time, there is, for lack of a better term, unofficial logic and accuracy tests that political parties historically have been part of. And then we do our own in-house logic and accuracy tests as well. So all of those things are available to you. The other thing is if in the middle of the night you want to see what's going on in the scanning room, you can go online and see what's happening, which ain't going to be a heck of a lot on most days. We are the only county in the state of Arizona that online streams our counting center every hour of the day, every day of the year. And if you want to say, I want to know what happened there in March 3rd of 2018, we'll have that archived as well. So it's not just.
I'm not trying to be hard here, but I am trying to be reasonable. And reasonable means to me that when we have a vote and we observe a vote and we say our integrity is involved and we represent it's accurate, as reasonably accurate as we can make it, we have to have some standard to apply that to. So surely there is somewhere on an archive a flow chart that shows how the various kinds of ballots get to boxes, what's supposed to be done, and how they get into a system. And I would like to see that and read through it, review it, if I could. Otherwise, so I go out, I take a course from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party, they should be the same, or from you, they all should be the same. And this is how we're supposed to do it. But I'm getting old, and my memory's not exact, and we're dealing with people who might be argumentative and who might not know themselves. So why do we not have, if we don't have, a flow chart that shows how all of this is supposed to work so that we and our observers can say it worked that way?
Well, there is it's what, 3 sheets, something like that, where every step is listed in terms of from the time a ballot is handed to a voter to they put it in the ballot box is then at the end of the voting is sealed. 2 different people from 2 different political parties bring it to the election department and, every step along the way.
I
No, but
The information that you're looking for is available, but the caveat that I have to that is reading the flow chart is going to tell you how it's supposed to work.
Right,
Observing is going to tell you whether it follows the process, and I think that's
that's my question.
okay. Once you have the information that Chris is talking about, then I think it's imperative that you, be it through the political party or be it through a representative appointed by your appointing individual to this commission, you actually watch the process.
I
It's
don't
fascinating.
mind, I don't mind doing that. In fact, I will pledge to do that when I can. I will miss probably the August election, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately, I've committed prior to something I have to do in July and August. Well, I tend to participate in the meetings till whatever you call it. But here's the story. I find your answer inadequate, because I would like to see it from the elections department's point of view, how they see it's supposed to be done. And if there are precincts which can't comply with those procedures, we ought to try to identify them before we have the vote. The reason I say this is because we are in a contentious time in this country. Very contentious. I would guess that some people might say we shouldn't talk. That's how extreme this goofy system is right now. And we should know a little bit more about how this gets done, because as I see our obligation, it's to say to the Board of Supervisors, the elections have been done with integrity. If that means we have to go a little bit out of our way to do that, I'm willing to do that. But I'm also curious, having been a person who looked at systems before, as to the flow of how this works.
A lot of this you would find in the procedures manual if you could get to them.
But also, the elections department has, and is available for you, the information on how they conduct.
Okay, I understand what you
Can I
just
get-
said.
if- can I
Are we
finish what I'm
saying we
saying?
do not have a flow chart?
We have a list of steps. We do not have
That means
a
we don't-
Boolean chart.
Okay.
If I may.
How hard would a chart be to
Okay,
make
time
up?
out. We're getting out of control, and as the chairman, I'll take control of the meeting again. You have a concern.
Yes,
You would like a flow chart.
yes, sir.
If we have the capability to produce a flow chart, can the elections department produce a flow chart?
There was a flow chart produced approximately 10 years ago to the minutest of detail. Let me look that over and see how it needs to be updated from the
That's
system
fine.
that we were using 10 years ago to now. I will tell you that it is detailed to the nth degree.
That's wonderful.
If I may, I'm going to tie this back to partly what you were talking about earlier with the security plan, because I think the two are actually part of the same concern.
Yes,
As this security plan is rolled out and the public becomes aware of it, the usual suspects are going to raise their concerns, but in the environment all of us are operating in, and it doesn't matter what political party you're from, the concern in the public's mind is that the integrity of an election is suspect simply because we rely on so much technical information. Finding a way to tie whatever security plan we come up with to reassure the public, at least as much as can be practically done, needs to be tied in with the education process about what our system is designed to do, because they're halves of the same coin. The security of the system is important, but how the process goes about is equally important. And to your point, having a flow chart, and I think this may be something you want to seriously think about, bringing some media people in and walking them through the steps, and maybe having a little handy dandy, 1 or 2 page flow chart with simple
8 or 10 page flow chart.
But the point is, having something that is, at least from a kindergarten standpoint, easy to understand. Ballot comes in, here's the different ways that it's handled. At the end of the process, we've got a fairly secure system and a plan to make sure that whatever that result is fairly accurately reflecting what the voters intended. I believe you've touched on something very important, John. The flow chart, having something that is out there for the public to, those that are interested in having access to, may go a long way to push back on that sense of unease amongst the public. I, from a practical standpoint, like to be proactive as much as possible rather than reactive, and I think given the nature of things with elections in general and some of the concerns across the state of Arizona that have occurred in the last cycle or so, it would be wise for us to incorporate the security plan as much as practical to a flow chart that is available for the public.
Is that doable before next month's meeting?
Excuse me, this is Arnie. I just want to remind people that, Brad, correct me, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, John Albin did a complete detailed flow chart of information from the point of view of the recorder to the point of view where you would count and process the ballot. Am I correct, Brad?
Yes, that was the flow chart I was referring to. For lack of a better term, we'll call it the Moffett flow chart.
Okay. That would be a good starting point because it breaks down some of the things that are missing from the flow chart because it's so detailed. And I think, it would be good to discuss. And I'm sorry I'm not there to John in person, but I'm talking about your concerns.
Karen Schutte for the Republican Party and I for the Democratic Party put together PowerPoint presentations for the observers in the party to show exactly what you were talking about. And if Karen still have hers, you could probably get it from her. I'd be happy to show my little presentation to anybody who'd like to see it.
I'd love to have it, but I would think maybe Brad would want it as well. So when you're doing whatever you're doing,
We do it for training observers and talking to candidates about asserting how the process works and how they fit into it.
Back to my question.
Okay.
Can we have the flow chart by next month's meeting?
I will make every effort.
Well, if we have the flow chart, even if it hasn't been updated.
Yes.
Oh, we have the flow chart.
Absolutely.
That definitely needs to be on the agenda.
Yeah.
And I've got it on
Yeah.
the future items, but
thank you.
we can't get you a flow chart right now, but we will get you a
No,
flow
I
chart.
understand how the
Okay.
process works. I'm agreeable with what you just said.
Okay. Anything else on the security plan flow charts? And again, I would emphasize participation in the process is I think critical to understanding what works and what doesn't work, and giving you a comfort level of the sanctity of the election is a big part of watching that process happen.
If I may, sir, I wondered if we had an update of this. I asked this gentleman, and he was nice enough to send it to me. Something you guys reviewed on March the 16th. I looked through it, tried to understand it as best as I'm capable. I'm not an IT man.
Is that the
I wondered-
security plan?
It was the security plan. I'm sure that we cannot, and I would urge us not to publish anything that would be damaging. Of course, we've got in the wrong hands, but do we have an update to this?
That's what's currently being worked on. As I mentioned, as we were getting to start, the Arizona Secretary of State has this, if you will, cybersecurity
Right.
effort that's ongoing, that's just now launching. I want to try and reflect as much of that as I can in that document as we go forward. My intent is to have a document in as near final form as I can get for our July meeting, and that then have it out for public comment, review, absorption, in time for people to have before the August 28th.
Does the board need to vote on the security
It
plan?
doesn't have to. I suppose we could put it there, but it doesn't have to.
Is there a need, and I feel like I'm asking too many questions for the first time I'm here, but is there a need for us to look at or be presented a more private session, whether it's not broadcast. I realize we call for that under the election.
I think the open meeting law would prevent that.
I don't know that, but I think,
I don't think it will, so.
I think you'll find, and again, I'm not trying to put you off, but I think observing the process, there's nothing about the process that's confidential, hidden, secret, or anything like that, to include how the ballots are tabulated, how they're conducted. That doesn't tell you anything other than the fact, no, I mean,
There's nothing.
there's nothing in there that I would feel uncomfortable. In fact, I would prefer that the public had access to that. So there's a comfort level on the part of the public that we're doing everything we can to make sure that the election results that we publish are valid. You know, when somebody comes in and says, how can I feel confident that the election results that you've posted are correct? And we say, well, we'd like to share that with you, but our security process is a secret. They're saying, aha, you don't have a security process.
I don't think we have a secret security process, and the intent of this is wise and useful. I'm asking the question, however, if there are some things that we don't want in the public purvey because of they create a security issue by themselves that we should be made aware of, and in a private or a private, non-private session. I'm opening that up for discussion.
And I would say, no, there's nothing in the process that I think needs to be protected, that the public needs to be not privy to.
Well, some of the procedures, yes. Some of the details. In other words, we don't want the public to know how to break the system.
Right.
And if the election department is going to go to that level of detail to us, I don't think the open meeting law will allow us to have a private session on that, because the open meeting law has a very limited number of things we can do in executive session. And I don't think that would be one of those things.
Well, let me ask the question. The obvious question is, in your mind, do you think we need such a meeting? And then the next question is, does that then, if we do need a meeting, does that then violate the public executive session? Does that violate the law? I do not want to be a part of violating the law under any circumstances, nor do you, nor does this board, I'm sure.
I would posit that the security that we're concerned about within the scope of this committee, you got about as comprehensive and understandable a briefing as you're going to get. That's the vulnerability outside of that is stuff that we can't control. A fire in mail truck full of ballots would definitely have an impact on the election. Somebody that knew where the representatives and a sheriff's deputy were transporting ballot boxes from a remote precinct location to central count provides an era of vulnerability, but everybody knows that when the election is over at the polling place, the ballot box is sealed, the election materials are put in a van. Members of at least 2 political parties are in that van, and if they're available, the sheriff's deputy is in there. And if somebody wants to hijack that van between Ajo and Tucson, that could happen. But I think everybody knows that. I think,
But that's not, I think you're past the issue of what I'm talking about.
If I think I can answer the question that you asked me.
Yes, sir.
I don't think that we have the necessary expertise and experience to understand the technical details of what the security plan would entail. And as such, we couldn't make cogent suggestions on the details. An overview, yes. Getting into the details in the way that I think you're referring to, no.
Maybe David could get in here. Is there anything that's really top secret in what you would plan for a security plan that shouldn't know about?
Well, some information we won't give you, like the passwords that we're going to use for a specific language.
I can assure you, forget
We're, but most of the details we do give you, the fact that physical security, we work in conjunction with the Pima County Sheriff's Department to have uniformed sheriffs at vulnerable points.
Except at the post office.
There's a
But that's a whole other story.
We can describe as best we can the security measures we take. But I think, not knowing exactly what kind of detail you're looking for, everything else we pretty much give you. We're not going to withhold much because we got, where we're vulnerable, we put additional security so that, so like air gaps, so we can tell you certain parts of our processes. One of the things they did touch on was the fact that you have to use ES&S specific USB drives to go from our election management system to our central count DS850s. That to load your program onto the things, it's proprietary media, hardware. So we can say, which I didn't put in there, but I thought that was a valuable thing from what ES&S said. There are additional steps that may be missing, but we can still put those to the public. Because it's not a vulnerability that if they know without an ES&S stick, you're not changing anything. And it requires really 2 sticks to go and a password.
How hard are those sticks to obtain and or replicate if we have good Chinese technology?
Replicate may be a problem because of their software, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. You would have to get it, but we don't use them outside of our building. Predominantly, we don't use them outside of our tabulation room, although we do use express votes, one room over, in our early board situation where they're duplicating ballots. So and it would be in our secure equipment storage area. So that would be the only 3 places we may have some in another safe, but they should all be in the safe, in the tabulation room. So that media is locked down. And the possibility of somebody bringing it from the outside, the only one that may have access is our early board members, but then they would have to have the key to unlock the
key or the key to the machine.
The key to the machine to open up where you put the media in, and if they're prying out with a screwdriver, somebody would notice it.
So you can't just go to eBay and order one?
No, but if you had the personnel, you could probably manufacture it if you had your hands on the media to begin with.
Okay.
But I believe once those are initialized, the media itself is a big deal. You can get a B use some of the Raytheon. Once they're initialized with the keys, that is when they become encrypted.
Right.
And that's when they become secure. It's not when you take them out of the package.
You're correct that, but theirs are encrypted initially.
It's actually on the hardware side of it.
It's in the, and then to use it for any specific election, it's again encrypted with a different part. So if they don't get to our EMS to get that information to download,
How
then
often
they
are
can't.
they encrypted for security purposes and put a code in it?
For each election, they have a unique encryption.
So you could take
They're a one-time use product.
a one-time use
Yep.
product. So you could take one home, but chances are it would,
It would not be of any value to you, because when we program the new election, and at the final step is to burn media. And then you produce the sticks necessary for the 6 850s we have, and usually, I think, burn 4 sticks for our 10 express votes, because we don't use them all at the same time. If one goes down, we have a backup we can throw in and use the media for.
I understand there's, with regard to the keepings of the code, there's 4 people that have access to it.
There are 4 of us who, 2 A's and 2 B's, we'll call them, who can log onto our EMS, our election management system. And we are the only 4 that are able to program an election. County IT, there are 2 people who have passwords where they're able to get in, not to the election management, but to do any hardware problem. We can't, we're locked out of emptying the trash can or any of that kind of stuff. But if the system fails and we need somebody to come in and fix it for us, they can log in with limited access to the normal computer software. And they're, and if they did that, then we have to do a whole and restart the election, probably.
Because we're not connected to the internet, we can't even update the clock, because it falls behind after a little while. So we can't even do that. IT has to come in and put their.
I think it would be, I think it would be interesting, and I don't want to take this off the rails here, maybe future discussion, just to understand a little more about the thoroughness of the background checks that people go through.
Yes.
Because, yeah, they work here, the IT people, whatever, and that's the insider threat. Yet the guy's words sometimes said, assumed trustworthy people. Yeah, I used that phrase, and I said, wait a minute, I'm not going to assume anything. So the IT people haven't had the keys to this thing. How thorough are their background checks? Going through that? Like maybe for a future discussion.
Well, what we also do is, prior to the election, we take certain files off the system, send it to our IT, so a second party runs a hash check on them to see if that program that we're going to use is identical to the program that was installed. So we know that nothing's been changed on our election management system. And that they certify that they get the same hash value. We seal that, or they seal that with a tamper evident seal, and with their certification, we send that to the SOS. We also send them a copy of our.
But who is that person? Who is that person? I mean, what kind of background checks do these kind of stuff?
But
how thorough is the person? It's the person I'm concerned about, not the process.
Well, and granted, but it's somebody outside of our group, so that you have a different group that checks to say that it matches. And unless we're coordinating, why would he back us?
I think.
I said I don't want to take up there. Just
If we want to get to the point where we're trying to make a perfect system,
yeah,
I ain't got that much time.
I understand. I mean, it would just be interesting seeing, are they doing Google searches on their background? Is it the background
No,
check?
the sheriff's department does a standard background check.
What's a standard background check? Is
And
that?
it is not the same as a military or federal government top secret, but I think it probably is at least equivalent to a military confidential.
That's not very much.
No, it's not.
That's not the.
But, you know, they're looking for more or less the obvious.
But then we have checks on our process through the whole thing. So afterwards, now, some people complain that we don't do enough, but we do hand count audit, where we have batches of randomly chosen ballots to check on our work, to see if our machines are producing a similar results as what individuals would see. So if there was, and that's to see if there is a large disparity to indicate something's going on. But
I don't want to take it off the rails here, so I'm sorry.
I'd just like to interject one more security. In the past, when the IT people from outside have been invited in, the parties have been invited in to come and watch the process. So in one case, they were emptying the trash can. And so we sat there and we watched what things were going out of the trash can. And when they did a duplication of a result system, that kind of thing, the parties are generally invited to come and we usually are there to watch it.
It strikes me as that comment goes, that this is, emptying the trash can is a technical thing. And we just opined that maybe we ought not to get any further into some of the technical stuff that is being done here. I would wonder how an observer who is a non-technical person would be able to find anything wrong with emptying a trash can, except maybe they push the red button as opposed to the blue button.
They're looking at, they took out of the trash can A, B, C, D, E, and F, and G, and are those things that should have gone out of the trash can.
But those are all code processed things, and maybe they left one of the things out of the code. I'm suspect of machines too, and I appreciate this gentleman's remark about paper backup. But I also would like to pursue what this gentleman just said just for a second, and I wonder if we have codes that have to be entered into the machine, and there's 4 people within the elections department that have codes, an A and a B, and there's 2 IT people outside, and they have a background check that's roughly equivalent
If I remember correctly,
to a confidential. Maybe we should be suggesting that those folks that have codes and or access to the codes should have maybe a little more stringent and more often background check. Just,
like I said, if I remember correctly.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I don't know it all, so.
Because this was brought up, what, 3-4 years ago, I think, something about the background checks. And that was my impression, was that the background check was more or less looking for obvious and maybe not quite so obvious.
Well, and that's been the whole line of problems with these huge breaches of computer security all along. It's the fox is already in the hen house, and we just don't know he's a fox yet.
I would table this discussion for a future agenda. We can sit here until next week and discuss this issue.
Yeah.
But until we have some of the information that we're going to get provided, like an updated security manual and a flow chart, John, we've all had the same concerns that you have, and I'm sorry
if I prolonged this meeting too much.
you haven't prolonged the meeting.
You wouldn't be the first, you won't be the last.
I have done the same thing.
And I can look at every single member of the village and say that. Myself included.
Primary election next item on the agenda.
So the primary election is August the 28th, as I mentioned to you. I'm looking through my materials right now. So the official logic and accuracy test will be held Tuesday, July 31st. It will commence at 8:20 a.m. and will probably be done in about a 2-hour time if history is any indicator. This test
July what day?
July 31. This test will include the digital scan test as well as our accessible voting equipment as well. After the completion of that test, assuming a successful completion, we will be eligible to begin counting early ballots if we have a sufficient volume of verified ballots from the recorder that are ready to tabulate. Along those lines, I have heard from Chair Eppheimer from the Republican Party. The Logic and Accuracy Board person from the Republican Party is Chris King. I don't believe Mr. King is all that familiar with our processes as well, so we'll make sure that he's able to come down and observe all of this good stuff as well. I have spoken with Chair Joe Cote of the Democratic Party. She has my request for a Logic and Accuracy Board member. She says it's making its way up its pile and will soon be at the top. I have suggested that if you are
I've
available.
already told her that I will be.
Okay.
The question is, I always like to have a second person.
Sure.
And so we're trying to, the second person is good.
Okay, all right. For those of you who may not be aware of it, the Logic and Accuracy Certification Board is there to attest to all of the procedures that were done and that the computer tabulation equipment operated as performed. One of the ways that they've done that in the past is that the individual parties mark their own test decks and run them through the machine as well. This is done prior to the official test by the Secretary of State, who does much the same thing. So those things are available to the public. We're actually post in the newspapers and online, and if anybody wants to come down and watch, they may. Depending upon how many individuals of this group wants to attend, because it can get a little busy in there from time to time. Lately, the Secretary of State has been bringing as many as 5 to 6 people with the Logic and Accuracy. Yeah, 9 or 10. So assuming that we have floor space for you, we will probably actually let you into the room as well to observe. While you were there, I'll tell you right now, and reinforce it, you can't touch anything, but you can certainly ask questions about just about anything as well. Now then, we don't have a primary election ballot just as yet. As you may know, there are challenges ongoing, the ones that I know that are still pending that are affecting our ballot. And I'm sorry, I don't know the party affiliation for some of these candidates, but for U.S. Senate, there's a candidate, or potential candidate by the name of Marks. According to the Secretary of State's website this morning, there is a pending withdrawal by that particular individual. There is a candidate apparently by the last name of Pico, I hope I'm saying that right, P-I-C-O, for Secretary of State. I still have that as pending. There are other pending challenges going on, but those do not impact Pima County nor the state, so some very...
You should have one for McCormick for governor. He's being challenged.
I believe that this, off the ballot, says today.
As of this morning?
As of this morning.
Maricopa County has declared Pico doesn't have enough signatures, but she's still going to court under court days right now.
I can tell you that communications I've been included in from recorders across the state are going nuts this time. And here's what apparently is happening, certainly not in all instances, but challengers who go through the petitions, find a particular sheet, particular line number, are using very, very dated voter registration information to propose their challenges. So if they say, well, you've got Doug Smith at 1234 Mockingbird Lane in Legend District 1, well, according to my information, that's 6 months old. I'm exaggerating perhaps here, but I don't know whether I am or not. We're going to challenge that guy. What I've heard from both Mr. Rhodes here, as well as via some emails that I've been included on from Mr. Fontes, is there has been a lot of challenges that if they had just looked at current information, they wouldn't have gone forward at all. So there is suggestion that going forward, there may be a fee involved in challenging, and if you're successful, you don't pay the fee, but if you lose your fee, and if you withdraw, you might lose as well. Yeah. So I don't know what else I need to add. Like I say, I will get a calendar of events for everything that we're going to do going forward. It will be posted online as well. Kind of going to the next item because it pertains to the primary election. But polling places, those have been approved by the Board of Supervisors. I've got a fairly big copy here. I think you have a smaller one. But there was only one change. Supervisor Miller's office contacted me and asked if one of the proposals for Precinct 61 could be changed. We originally had that at a Sheraton Hotel on Grant. They found that location to be inconvenient. We agreed, and so the location is now at a Lutheran church on North Swan, which is going to be a great improvement. So I thank Supervisor Miller's office for bringing that to our attention. Poll workers are being recruited and assigned as we speak. We've talked about the election process. I don't know whether you need to get this much down into the weeds, but if you care to serve as a poll worker, I guarantee you it's going to be an education. And it is a long day, but I will tell you that much. The poll worker classes, for those individuals who aren't aware of it, there are many tasks within the polling place on election day, so classes are geared towards particular tasks. The inspector is the person who's in charge of the polling place. Usually the inspector and the judges, those are the individuals who maintain control over the ballots, as well as maintain control over the signature roster, are in one classes, and then the clerks and marshals are in other classes. You're invited to attend any and all of those classes if you like, and they will be scattered throughout the metropolitan area, including out in Sills and out in the Awful area in Green Valley and the like as well. Any questions on the primary? It's still evolving. Oh, one other thing, the Libertarian Party primary is closed. So individuals who go to the polling place and wish to vote a Libertarian ballot must have been registered as a Libertarian by the cutoff date. All other individuals who come in and are independent, for lack of a better term, unaffiliated, may choose a ballot. The primary election ballot will also reflect municipal offices and questions in the town of Oro Valley, the town of Marana, the South Tucson, and Sahuarita as well. If an individual comes to a polling place or asks for an early ballot from the recorder, they are going to need to declare which party ballot they want, which will also reflect that municipal candidate or contest if it applies. And if they choose not to distinguish particular party's ballot on election day, they'll receive a municipal ballot only.
I interject that it's at the party's discretion that the primary is closed.
Yes, that was done by the state party. I think it was decided almost 2 years ago. It just took a while to process.
Okay, anything else on the primary election for proposed polling locations?
If I may, are we as a committee going to, our commission going to send some observer, designate someone or ask someone to be an observer to the logical and accuracy test? I know we're all invited, but is it appropriate to ask someone from this group to go and give us a report back?
Yeah, the political parties typically send their representatives, and then whoever else shows up will chime in at the appropriate time for.
Yeah, it's trying to get us to shut up.
It's.
Well,
This is the
how
first
do we
election
know?
we've had where we haven't had both LNA people on this commission.
That's a good point.
That's
You
true.
guys been here for a long time?
And it's had Carrero before that.
Yeah. So, yeah, traditionally, we've had people on the commission that are LNA approved so that we get the information back.
But the commission does not typically appoint somebody to do it.
Well,
If you'd like to make that recommendation and volunteer to do that, we can have.
I'd love to be able to do it, and I would do it if I could. I cannot. When I accepted this position, I knew I had a conflict in July and parts of August. And I regretfully have to go do that, do what I have to do. Otherwise I would. But
I mean, you can
it's,
do it for the general.
I think it would be appropriate that this commission have an observer there and report back. We are supposed to be the integrity. We're not supposed to be Democrats or Republicans or whatever. We're supposed to be Libertarian. We're supposed to be people with some integrity.
Well, part of the reason that the parties do it is because they're a separate party logic and accuracy test. And that involves a whole lot of work, and part of filling out a whole lot of ballots, 600, 700 ballots. And so the person who does it has to hopefully earn something, be part of the party test too.
So it's our responsibility, I guess, I'm assuming from what I've read, to make recommendations to the board about the election and I presume oversee to the best of our ability what is happening with the election. observe as a board the integrity test?
The logic and accuracy.
Logical, yeah, I'm trying to see where this goes, so I understand it a little better. I'm new at this, and so I might be asking a dumb question.
No, it's not a dumb question. It's, we all have our own lives, just like you're not going to be able to do it for July and August because of prior commitment. A lot of us,
Well, there's 10 of us.
Yeah.
right, so those of us who can go usually want to go and do. But there's no official of the commission saying you will go.
I think in the case, to your specific question, what will occur at the LNA testing, Barb will be more than capable of letting the commission know what occurred, and then any other things that come from the Republican side or any of the other political parties, I'm sure the people that represent that on this commission will hear plenty from that individual and through that will be able to chime in back to this committee after the LNA test.
If the past is any indicator, those municipalities that I mentioned will be on the ballot. We'll have their municipal clerks there as
Yes.
well witnessing the process.
And if this commission is going to provide representation on the part of the commission, because we are a multi-party commission, and I would like at least 2 people of different political parties there observing on behalf of this commission. I just looked at my calendar. I don't have anything on the calendar for July 31st. I'd be happy to be there as a member of the Democratic Party. But if I'm going to be there as a Democrat, I'd like a Libertarian, a Republican, or a Green Party person there as well.
I don't remember off the top of my head. If there's no Libertarian in the primary, then the Libertarians are not asked for the LNA, right?
What the procedures manual, the old version, basically said is that there needs to be 2 members on the logic and accuracy certification boards, and they cannot be of the same party. That's all it says.
For purposes of the LNA, on the 31st, I'm unable to attend that meeting. So,
Yeah.
unless the
And
boys,
this has nothing to do with who's the LNA board. This is just somebody from this commission observing the logic and accuracy process.
it's been coincidental that in the past, the people representing the LNA board happen to be members of this commission, so it was 2 for.
Yeah.
Levoy, you're a Republican, you want to be there?
I might be there.
That's not,
Great enthusiasm.
yeah. And that's not
I'm looking for a conflict real hard.
If you're a first timer observing the process, it is very educational. If you've done it before, it can be tedious and boring.
And this is down at the election department, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
And it does happen on time, because it is posted with the public. The Secretary of State is going to be going to multiple counties that day and has to keep to their schedule. So,
With me.
How did you say?
the test will commence at 8:20. The Secretary of State has down here, they've got to be departing no later than 10:45. I don't suggest that the logic and accuracy test is going to take 2 hours, but I'm guessing you need to at least have at least an hour.
And that's in the morning, right?
That is correct.
All right, Brian, you're on. Keep finding the empty.
He twisted his arm.
I'm looking here, it's a freaking wide open day. I can't believe it. All days.
Okay.
Before we have to
Your
make
day off.
Yes.
Okay, we're on a time crunch now. In light of the time crunch, item number 11 on the agenda, I asked to put on there, it was vote from, home. I will move that item be moved to next month's agenda, and we'll postpone that discussion. It's not critical. Discussion of questions from the recorder, which is item number 10. Barbara, you would respond with the
I
recorder.
had a long phone call with the recorder. Let's see, there are 2 things I talked about. One is having all the new members of this board get a tour of the recorder's office. And if there's some that haven't done it before, possibly, she's interested in the new members really understanding how the works from her point of view. And she would be-
Very instructive.
Is this her office downtown,
This is
or is this her
here,
office?
the
on Country Club?
elections office. And so we can arrange for a time for that, which works for everybody.
We
And this-
mentioned, I'm sorry.
I would like to not only tour that, but I'd like to see these gentlemen's operations too, obviously.
They're in the same building.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can do
Different
one and then
offices
go
in
to
the same
other.
building.
That address is 6550 South Country Club. Again, 6550 South Country Club. To give you major cross streets, it's Valencia and Country.
And maybe meet with the three of you new people to see what times are open and then see if that works for the recording, after the meeting. Okay, the second thing is we talked about the questions. Those of you who are new, we had submitted, I think it was about 3 pages of questions for the recorder's office, and they took offense at the length of the questions, refused to answer them. So I talked with her about what would be an acceptable set of questions for us to submit. And she said there were a number of questions on the previous one that could easily have been answered by just looking at the state law and the procedures manual, and she wouldn't be interested in wasting time answering questions that are answerable easily elsewhere. She also would only be interested in answering questions about things that are legal now under state law. For example, questions whether the recorder can do something or other. We know they can't be done under state law at this point, or they have to be done. So there's no point in her taking time to answer that type of question. So if there are other questions that deal, say, about security issues that weren't answered in the last time around, that she would be happy to deal with a small group of questions. She's extremely busy right now, and will be all the way through.
Sure, that's understandable. Do we have anywhere on record that list of
It
questions?
wasn't sent to everybody. But we might just start all over again. We've had a lot of security questions answered. In the meantime, there was a report from, wasn't it you who went over and made a report on your visit? Could we send that around again? So we know what questions have already been asked.
I'll have to look, I think I still got it on my computer. If I do, I'll send it to Michael.
Yeah, so that if we can narrow it down to a few questions that didn't get answered the first time around, that are questions about things that the recorder can or cannot do, and don't deal with things that are easily found out elsewhere, she would look to answer that type of question.
For the edification of the 3 new members, a reminder, in the state of Arizona, the entire election process is deliberately broken up under separate elected officials. Board of Supervisors has the election department proper, which is essentially the mechanics of what goes on election day. The recorder is voter registration, completely separate office, elected separately. For purposes of this commission, we make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. The reason we are concerned with the voter registration issues is because part of our mission is not just the elections department, but the overall voter integrity in Pima County. At that point, we start asking questions about voter registration, security, etc. We have no control or authority to, other than just request of FN Rodriguez, the elected county recorder, information about that. We have no authority to make her do it. So we can ask the questions, it's up to her whether she answers.
And the other thing that the recorder's office does is receive all the early ballots, check them for the signature validity, and then pass them on to the elections department. So that's a significant part of what they do.
That's a significant part of control of the vote.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So she would be happy to
So,
show you how that works.
and that's what, 80% or better of the
Yes.
Yeah.
ballots?
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever is in that flow chart has to have
Right.
some degree of some information from the vote.
Well, it's been over half for a long time, so I'm sure it's in the flow
It's
chart.
pretty significant from what
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But understand that we have
Like
no control
80% or
over that.
something. Pardon?
We have no control over that.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's
But they're often-
it is what we call the horns of a dilemma.
They are very open to observers. They've been really good with party observers in past elections. explaining everything that happens and so forth, so.
Yeah, and when I was down there, she was very open about the procedures and very willing to, answer questions about everything.
But this whole, if we're just kind of talking hand to hand here, this whole election process is about the integrity of the election on the election day, so to speak, and the tabulations thereafter, and not the stuff that dribbles in onesies, twosies.
Well, yes and no. Because the stuff that dribbles in before the election is still counted, and we're still concerned with the counting.
That's the main.
We are espousing with great length about how these ballots get in boxes and so on and so forth, and the control of the boxes, and the fact that we have a paper trail and on and on. But there's no paper trail for something that doesn't make it to the box.
Nope. Can't be.
Okay,
Anyway.
we're off topic,
Yep.
significantly off topic. I agreed to move vote from home to next month's agenda. We will revisit the questions to the recorder and come up with, and vet the questions, so the ones we can answer based on state law, and questions that are related to things that she can or can't do because of state law. We'll pull off the list and see if we can't get a little bit more congenial relationship with the recorder. Future agenda items.
If I may, we can remove the legislation update until the legislature is back in session.
That's way off in the future.
Yes, we don't need to put it on the agenda.
It will not be on the July
Right.
6th agenda.
I have a Arnold, I just want to suggest that we're going to deal with Barbara's suggestions, comments about recorded point of view on questions that we have somebody, Barbara's going to take a first draft and breaking down those questions or creating some new ones, and then she circulates them before the next meeting so we can discuss them at the meeting and make some progress and reach consensus.
That's fine.
Because part of the problem, part of the problem here with the recorder is that even though we are not her boss, we have an advisory role authority, and it doesn't necessarily have to conform to her agenda for discussion. Because one of the advantages of having a group like ours is that we can raise questions that nobody else is considering. Not telling people what to do, but we can raise the question.
But she's very open to that under the conditions that I mentioned. Future agenda items, I had assumed that the annual report had been tabled to this meeting, and it wasn't, they had comments on one section. I'm going to pass out my rewrite of the one section that dealt with the RLA for discussion next time.
Fine. And I will incorporate those. And Arnie had suggestions to me as well.
Brian, since we have some members, can you comment on what your plans are for educating them about the controls so that the rest of us don't have to sit through a session again?
I'll put that on next month's agenda, now that we have all the people.
Okay.
filled.
So you should,
Okay, then.
perhaps Michael can send out the original version of the annual report to everybody.
Already been done.
Yeah, but the new people didn't.
Okay.
Can you send me the electronic version of this, please?
I will make no comments because I have no knowledge of
Yeah, not for comments, for future agenda.
Future agenda dates?
Yeah, next month's meeting is July 20th. Is that a problem for anybody?
No?
Well, actually, that'll drop off the next month's agenda. August 17th?
I will say that's during a training week for me.
For those who don't know, Mr. Dale is the poll worker trainer extraordinaire.
Yeah, that'll be during the clerks and marshals.
Don't
I
schedule
won't be
any
able
classes
to
on
attend the
Friday.
meeting, but I will basically be able to send out the finalized agenda on Monday, and I will not be available for emails or phone calls or anything else the whole rest of the week, and then I'll be here for the Friday meeting.
Okay. And then the add-on to replace July, September 21st. Be our regularly scheduled meeting day. Is that a conflict for anybody?
It's a little of an election. We'll be probably training people that week too.
No, not
Not
yet.
Not
Not
that
yet.
far.
I move we adjourn.
Any other future agenda items?
I'll have the flow chart, and the events calendar, and all that other good stuff.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.
Thank you, Arnie.
Okay.